Good afternoon and welcome back. So this will be one of the first lectures in the Introduction to Blueprints section. So very briefly really, this is just going to cover what blueprints are and how we use them and the general concept behind them. So for anyone who is familiar with programming in other languages, for instance I've used C#, C++, and small amounts of Java through things like Unity and C++ with the Unreal 4 engine. Blueprinting is kind of a visual representation of programming. So it's very easily accessible. It's intended to be used by people who are slightly less interested in programming but just want to get something working. But at the same time it's proven to be incredibly powerful and a lot of the time you can get something done very, very quickly in it, and it's no less efficient than if you were to have scripted it in a written language. So within Unreal, to create a blueprint, it's as simple as right-clicking somewhere, finding the blueprint class, and Epic have provided a long list of different classes that you can utilize. So they will have some base functionality or components in them which will be generic and often utilized in that type of blueprint. So as an example, what we'll be using a lot in this project, and you'll probably end up using a lot in any project, is an actor. And to find out what an actor is, you can highlight the blueprint that we're talking about, or you can just look to the right here, and Epic gives some really good detailed expressions in the editor of what things are. Failing that, you can go to the online documentation provided by them as well, and most of that is very good too. But I mean, it explains it exactly what it is here. So an actor is an object that can be placed or spawned into the world. So that's why we're going to be using a lot of them. Pretty much most of the things that we don't control will end up being an actor, and then that brings us on to pawn. So a pawn is something that can be spawned into the world. Well, it is an act, to be specific, it's an actor that can be possessed. So because it's an actor, it means it can be spawned in the world, but it can also be possessed and receive input from a controller. So this will be how we're creating our player in the game. And we can just read through all of these and they quite quickly start making sense on how they will be utilized and put together to make a game function. And that's really all they are. Blueprints will be what make our game function at the end of the day. You don't need to follow along with this bit because I will be destroying it, but basically if we create an actor quickly, this is our blueprint. We have a few different options here. We have our viewport, our construction script, and our event graph. So a blueprint is essentially an object in itself, and it's a self-contained object. So we can add all of the components that we'll need for a certain object in the game inside of this blueprint, and then we can instantiate this over and over again and reuse it. So for instance, if we wanted this to be a cube, we can add a static mesh. So that would be the first thing in the viewport, and then we would change that to be, well in fact we can use one of my models. I said cube, so we'll use the power up. So now we have a representation of a power up inside of this blueprint that I've created. It won't do anything because we've not programmed anything yet, but if we compile and save that, we can drag that into the world. And there's no light, but you can see by the outline that we now have that power up in the world. So that's how they work. And then if we go back quickly, we've got a few different compartments of the blueprint which I'll be running through in more detail. But the construction script is essentially fired at the very beginning of the blueprint coming to life, and we'll give it some early functionality. And then we have our event graph where pretty much everything else will be run in the game. So there are some of the outlining features of blueprinting, what it will contain, and I didn't want to go too in depth with this now because that will be the content of the next lecture. We'll have a more detailed look at setting up a blueprint, so that will be exciting. It will be our very first blueprint in the Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to delete that because we won't need that at all, and save the project as it was, and I will see you in the next lecture.